It's funny, we had a leadership training thing yesterday, and they asked if there were people who didn't like public praise, and I was like,
What do we do with that? We love you, Val. We're so sorry.
Keep it short? How about that? Okay, so let's see. We need to call to order. Am I not? I'm sorry. I can't tell because I can't hear that. That's really weird. Good morning, everyone, and I will now call the meeting to order. And a very special welcome to those of you watching from home. Welcome. And we need a chalice lighting. So, do we have something written down, or I just have to make it up? I can always make it up.
Okay, make it up.
So, I welcome you all into this space. We are here gathered together in community to discuss the future of this congregation. And I ask us all to consider the options that are laid before us and know and take into consideration all the information you will get. And when we get there, let's make an informed choice together.
Amen.
All right. So I'm glad to see all of you here. It's really cool. I love it. I was able to go to South Bay this morning for worship down there. That was fun too. So yeah, and now I would like to call Robbie Evans, our Director of Operations, up for a 2025 annual pledge update. And I did this while she's still back there, so I'll just keep vamping while she comes down here. Da-dun, da-dun, da-dun. That's okay. You know what? Yeah. My dad always said that he believed in running until you're tired of it, and he got tired of it when he was 9. There's chairs for you guys.
Hey, Robbie!
Thank you, everyone. This is a quick promise, pledge update and plea to those of you who haven't made your 2025 pledge yet. And I'm pretty much guessing that everybody in this room has. So you can just listen with open ears, and if you hear of anybody that hasn't yet, just encourage them. Dave will do a deep dive into our 25-year pledge history a little bit later in the program under the Our Sustainable Future presentation. We have budgeted $785,000 in pledges for this fiscal year. To date, we have received pledges from 263 of you for a total of $710,000. A huge thank you to those of you who have made your pledge. There are still 87 people who pledged in 2024 who haven't died or left the church, who have not renewed nor increased their pledge for 2025. If they renew, this will mean an additional $89,000. Our grand total would then be $799,000, which would fabulously surpass our conservative budget number, okay? This would be awesome. Please make your pledge for 2025 if you haven't already. Dave Hunt will be sending out an email tomorrow as a reminder to get your pledge in. Please respond to that email as soon as you read it. We would be so grateful to do our operations and fulfill our mission. Thank you. Thank you. And now I would like to introduce Reverend Sarah Gibb-Millspaugh for her presentation on the minister search process. Sarah. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Hello, friends. It's good to be with you this weekend, and a weekend that really reminds us of the purpose of a congregation. I was here yesterday for the memorial service for Rhiannon Smith, your beloved board member and also a former colleague of mine on the Pacific Western Region staff, and here today for the worship service about our partnerships all around the world and how we can connect and create meaning in these really turbulent times. So I feel like in so many ways this weekend grounds us in the purpose of church for these conversations. So I'll say a little bit about who I am real quick. You see me show up periodically. I am on the regional staff of the Unitarian Universalist Association. I'm your congregation's primary contact. And I am here to talk to you about the search for a settled minister, which is in your future. So let's go to the next slide. There is a process behind this. And when I say it's a process, it's not just like because of what the UUA says you should do. It's because what the Unitarian Universalist Association represents is the collective wisdom of all of the trials and errors of all of our different congregations over decades. And some of the things that we've learned about best practices are what I'll reflect back to you today and what are written in our handbook for congregations doing a settled ministerial search. Some of the key components of that are reflecting on the congregation, on who you are, what your core identity is, what you need in terms of a leader, what's going to resonate with you theologically, social action-wise, all of that, and kind of where your arc is and what's going to take you to the next level on that arc. And then there's also a part of the process which is marketing this congregation and this place to potential ministers who might apply. And then getting applications, evaluating potential candidates, and then the congregation gets to meet the finalists, spend 9 days with them, and really engage and decide about whether or not to call them as their new lead minister. So, these things involve a search committee, they involve a lot of process, and you've got a very important conversation about your future of your building and your sustainable future. So I'm not going to go into all of the details here, but I have had conversations with the board about exactly how the search committee can get formed and all of that. But let's go to the next slide to talk about decision-making versus discernment. So one of our human defaults, and I've seen it happen here too, is that if we really feel strongly about a certain decision, like we advocate for it, we say, we gotta make a decision about this. I'm tired of being in transition. I'm tired of not knowing. Let's just make a decision. I'm one of those people. I get anxious when the decision hasn't been made. But what we really need to do is cultivate a practice of discernment. Like, if you think about discernment, how does that differ from decision making? Open mind, yeah. Curiosity, right. There's like a process of being curious and listening for what's arising from the collective people here, not just the loudest voices in the say, we gotta do it this way, but listening for the voice of the quiet ones and the needs of the whole community. And so that involves a different mode. Next slide. With collective discernment, you are listening for the emerging direction and needs in this organization. And when we discern, we're engaging the congregation's true calling and its deeper purpose in relationship with the whole community. And then discerning on top of that who is going to be a great fit for your next lead minister. That is going to take some time, and it takes some bandwidth. Next slide. So if you're really impatient to get on with the process and get a new called minister already, like maybe yesterday, why not? Please know that this process will be harmed if the congregation doesn't have the bandwidth to engage it. You really, really want a good match in a minister. There's not a shortcut. So given that you're deeply engaged in stay or go questions, it might take another year than originally planned to get to settling your senior minister. The board is going to discern and decide this spring about whether or not it seems like the congregation has the bandwidth and is at the right stage of discernment of its future to start forming a search committee. So I encourage you, if you have strong feelings about this, please, I understand the strong feelings, but pressuring and campaigning with the board is going to get in the way of their ability to discern. So I encourage you to just be open to their questions, that when they try to engage with curiosity about where the congregation's at, what the bandwidth is, what it would mean to take on search and creating a ministerial search committee in the midst of everything else the congregation's taken on. So with that, I'll share with you 2 timelines of how this could go. Option A would be this church year is the 3rd year of developmental ministry, focus on developmental goals. And then in May or maybe June. I should have checked exactly when you have your annual meeting. The Ministerial Search Committee would be elected from the congregation after a process of nomination and such. And then that search committee would start working over the summer. And during the 4th year of developmental ministry, there'd be a lot of focus on settled ministry search, like focus groups, surveys, conversations about who you need in your next minister. And then in August of 2026, so like a year from now, I mean, would it be a year from now? Yeah, I guess it would be. Well, no, January of 2026, a year from now, they'd be deciding on the semifinalists for this position. And then in August of 2020, or the spring of 2026, you'd have them come and do a candidating week. And then, assuming a successful call, they start in August. So there's also the possibility of doing this another year so that you can have the discernment and the attention and the capacity of the congregation ready, because maybe you'll be more clear about your sustainable future, what direction you're going. So let's look at option B in the next slide. And that's all of the same things except move forward 1 year. So you'd have a new settled minister beginning in August of 2027. So let's go to the next slide. The membership of the congregation has a lot of different ways to be involved. I mean, one is to nominate members of the search committee and, potentially be one of those members of the search committee, to participate in surveys and focus groups, and do some of that collective discernment about what you need in a minister. And then when the finalist is announced and they come for candidating week, that you would engage with them, that you would attend things, you would listen to their sermons, you would go to potlucks with them, you'd talk with them in meetings, and really discern if this person's a good fit. If the person is not a good fit, a congregation doesn't do anyone any good service to vote for them to come when they're not a good fit. So it really needs to be ensured that it's the right person, and then you vote on whether or not to call them if you're a signed member of the congregation. Now, before we close, I just want to name an elephant. Some people here would be very excited to see your associate minister, Kristen, be moved to be the lead minister, because she's fabulous. But there is a clear process for considering an inside candidate for ministry. And it still involves a search committee, and it still involves all of the collective discernment that I just named. So the way that you can help is to really give Reverend Kristen and the board and the eventual search committee the space that they need to figure out if this is something they want to pursue. Give Kristen the space to figure that out for herself. Give the board, or give the search committee the ability to figure that out for themselves. So please refrain from campaigning about it and trying to short-circuit the process. It won't be helpful for allowing that collective discernment to rise up. You really need and will benefit the most from a clear process around this. Now, my final slide has question marks on it for questions. Reverend Justine is a very experienced transitional minister and can answer questions that you have about this process, and anything that she can't answer can get bumped up to me or our UUA transition staff. And because we really want to give a good amount of time here for the whole conversation that you are having about your sustainable future, I won't be taking questions right now. So thank you all, and I wish you all the best in this journey. I'm excited for you.
Thank you so much, Sarah, for being here and for your words today. And now for the moment you've all been waiting for. We know why we're here, right? We're here to hear the information that we need to create a foundation for the decision that we're going to make for our sustainable future. Broadly, we all know what the three options that we have before us: stay, rebuild and share, or sell and move. Those are broadly our three choices. And what Dave is going to help us through is learning all the foundational information that we need to move forward in making that decision. Personally, where I stand, I want us to make a decision that works for all of us together. I have no other preference whatsoever. And now I invite Dave Hunt to come and give it to us.
Giving our folks in the control booth a moment to switch gears up there.
We'll need to be back into the meeting.
I'm sorry?
We'll need to be back into that Zoom room. We got booted from it.
So start it again?
Yes, sir.
No problem. It'll be the same number.
I'm in the lobby. I'm in the waiting room.
Or at least it should be. I am not seeing you.
I see you.
I see you. We're doing something a little different than we, and that is allowing me to control the slides from up here. All right. Looks like we are good to go. Well, welcome. We are glad you're here in person, viewing online, or tuning in later. We will record this and make it available for anyone who wants to see it again or see it for the first time because they couldn't be here. Your OSF team has been meeting for about a year now. You can see here the names of our minister, our staff, and our lay individuals who comprise the team. And I really want to thank all of those who have helped in preparing this presentation. Yes? I'm sorry, I can't hear you. Well, you have two choices. Well, several choices. One is we passed out a handout, which should mirror very closely what I'm showing, and the other is to move closer. So anybody who wants to move a little closer so they can see the screen better, this is a good time. And raise your hand and we'll try to bring you some extras. Would you like me to read the names of the folks? All right, Reverend Justine, and then in alphabetical order, Lolly Brown, Craig Darling, Evans, Andy French, Lawrence Hess, Steve Howard, Dave Hunt, Armin Coleman, Karen Lemfier, Sue Marbury, Sarah Ormond, Stephanie Weber, and Carolyn Woodbury. Couldn't have a better team. Okay. Friends, we are growing closer to a time when we will be asking the congregation to make decisions on how we move forward in regards to the future home of our Hillcrest campus. The OSF team is hopeful that the congregation will be able to converge on a scenario much like Valerie said, that is preferred by most and acceptable to everyone. Preferred by most and acceptable to everyone. We know that's an ambitious goal, but goals are supposed to be realistic and achievable. We're still a long way from reaching that goal. We're still gathering and sharing information, allowing time for discussion and discernment. You heard that term. And we also believe any final decision could take as much as a year or more from now. But know this, I am committed to us reaching that goal. There will be no votes today or anytime soon. However, we will be asking for your input via a survey in the next few weeks as we continue this discussion and discernment process. So why are we here today? Well, for me, I'm here because I volunteered, so I pretty much had to show up. You all, however, had a choice, and I'm going to infer that this subject, our future, is really important to you. We'll try to honor your choice to be here by being informative, clear, and concise. This is what we want you to take away from this presentation, namely the answer to these three questions. Why do we have to make a decision? When do we need to make it? And what are our choices? This presentation is aimed at providing factual details and best estimates for each of several paths we could choose in moving forward, and the next term steps that will move us closer to when that choice will be made. The presentation consists of 22 additional slides. Please don't read ahead. And we'll take about 30 minutes. We'll actually break it into two parts and answer questions after each part. We will have at least 15 minutes for questions after each part. Please write your questions down. There are cards here. I see them up front. You may not have them. If you want a card for a question, raise your hand, and there are people who will distribute the cards. Oh, they've already got them. Thank you so much, Craig. And if you run out of cards, we have more. Questions we don't answer today will be answered in the member section of our website. So write down your questions. That's one reason we're doing them in writing, because we may not get to them all. And pass them to the aisles as you write them. And they will be brought forward to Reverend Kristen, who will be shuffling them and deciding which questions we're going to answer today. One question per card, please. So I will cover these points. First, we want to convincingly show that our forecasted financial situation is the main factor driving our need to decide where we will be worshiping in the coming years. We see three possible paths forward. Stay here, do our best to continue to fulfill our mission despite the financial challenges, commit to finding another suitable site and sell our campus, or stay here but sell or lease all or part of the campus to help us overcome those challenges. This third scenario has many possible sub-options. We will allow approximately 60 minutes or more today for discussion and Q&A, and show you additional opportunities in the weeks ahead for small group forums. And I'll talk more about the upcoming congregational survey. Okay, there will be a lot to absorb here. I believe graphs and charts are the easiest way to understand financial data, as you can discern both numbers and trends. This is 19 years of our operating budgeted revenue. Think of operating as akin to the money you need each month to pay your bills, each month and each year. For us, that means the money we need to pay our staff, keep our campuses operating, and a myriad of other costs. Looking at the top dark line in the chart, in 2007, our budgeted operating revenue was $1.3 million. Over the years, that has increased at a rate of about 2%, that's that straight line. And for our current church year that ends this June, it's $1.8 million. Now, you all know that 2% is almost always less than the rate of inflation, so our growth, in one sense, has been no growth at all. As you know, there are two primary sources of that revenue: contributions from you and many others like you who may not be here today, and the parking lot. In this chart, I have added the pledge revenue in blue, and you'll notice that pledge revenue had a modest increase in those early years, but it's been flat since. In this chart, I added the parking lot revenue in green. By the way, if you're colorblind, try to use the markers. The parking lot revenue was rather flat until the pandemic years, but in recent years has risen significantly due to a dramatic increase in patients, visitors, elective medical procedures that started up again, and ACE added second shift Saturday and Sunday on site to charge and collect the parking fees. In this chart, I add everything else. This is made up of a number of things, including the preschool lease, facilities use, income from our legacy endowment, and amounts from our savings account. By the way, you know it's not good when you have to dip into your savings account to meet your yearly expenses. We've had to do that. Now, let's look at actual, not budgeted pledge income in more detail. This shows 25 years of pledge revenue. By the way, I'm very pleased to say that people do pay their pledges. In the past 10 years, the average of pledges paid is 97%. And I think that's very commendable, shows the commitment our members and friends have to First UU. Two parts to this chart. Total pledge revenue, that's the green bars. And as I mentioned before, pledge revenue has shown a modest increase over the years, but it's been pretty flat with the exception of the COVID year in 2021. Now, there's an anomaly in 2013, and that's when we went from pledges being made from July to June to January to December. And that's what we now call year-round giving, or YRG. A lot of people simply made the same pledge for both periods, even though they overlapped, and that brought in an extra $250,000. Now, over the same period, the total number of pledges has significantly declined from about 700 at the time the Owen Tolles retired to a little over 300 in the most recent years, which means, as we all know, there are fewer of us here now. And we could spend a lot of time examining why that is, but the point is, if it continues downward, well, I don't want to imagine that right now. But know this, if that downward trend is not reversed, we could simply go the way of other churches and disappear. This issue must be addressed in addition to where our future home is. In fact, I think it's at least equally important to the whole subject of stay versus go. Now we're looking at the average pledge combined with the same blue line as in the previous chart. The good news here is that as the number of pledges have gone down, the average amount each of us contributes has gone up. The average is now about $2,300, average pledge amount, as you see in that chart. And the median, the middle point of where all of us give, is about $1,200. That's why the total pledge revenue has not declined. Fewer of us are giving more. So thank you, all of you, for your generous support to First UU. Okay, it's probably no surprise that our older members and friends contribute the larger share of our pledge income. Again, the data is not trending in a favorable direction. In 2011, those who were 60 to 70 years old made up the largest share of dollars given, with those younger and older making up the rest. So you can see in the gray, that's the largest group. The green and the blue are the people older, the purple and the light blue, those are the people who are younger. The median age of those who pledged was 62 years old. Now, those over 60 make up 86% of giving, compared to 65% 13 years prior. The median age has increased to 72. Clearly, we need to attract more younger congregants who can help fill this potentially large gap when our beloved seniors are no longer here or able to contribute. Okay, back in 1956, who was here in 1956? A few of you, yes. When Alan Rosencrantz and others purchased a number of properties that became this 9-acre campus, I suspect they did not realize how valuable this entire property would grow to be. The cost of the undeveloped land in 1956 was $33,000, which is equivalent today, in today's dollars, that's $380,000. The parking lot, which began to generate revenue in the early 70s, is the single reason we can afford the programming and staff that we do, which means essentially the public is paying for 1/3 of our operating expenses. For the most recent church year that ended this past June, the parking lot revenue accounted for 36%, a little more than 1/3 of our total revenue. That number is $650,000. Pledges and gifts, shown here in blue, is about $800,000. Keep that $650,000 number in mind as we go forward in the presentation. Now, just like all of us, especially our campus, especially the buildings, continues to age. Parts are wearing out. And just like the cost of medical care, the cost of maintaining and replacing those worn out parts is significant. Our budget has not provided for saving the money we need to keep up with those costs. This past year, we did a very comprehensive survey of what we can expect to pay to adequately keep this facility operating in an acceptable fashion. Here is a breakdown of what we could expect to pay over the next 5 years, for which we do not have the funds. Over the next 20 years, we may need to spend a total of $5 million to perform the needed repairs and replacements. Where would that money come from? Because it is not in our budget. Our legacy endowment fund now totals $1.4 million. It takes a vote of 2/3 of the congregation to tap into that. Even so, that is not enough. If there is a sunny side to this, it's the fact that the bulk of the costs, as you can see here, are 5 to 10 years away. But as the last slide showed, we still need to find close to $1 million in the next 5 years. By the way, the 143-page maintenance survey is available for view in the members area of the website. You are welcome to see it. Andy French has done a great job of summarizing from that report what needs to be replaced and when. Here is a short summary. I see that. How about now? I don't know what, we worked on this, and sometimes there's a bit of a mismatch, and I see that Zane is trying to fix it. Thank you, Zane. So, here's the breakdown by area and by time period. And I know everybody wants to know what makes up the numbers in here. So there is a more detailed version, a one-page detailed version on the website. So you can look at this, you can go to the website and see the one-page version, or you can read the 143-page part and try to see if you agree with Andy's summary. So this concludes the part of the presentation that shows our financial situation and the challenges we face. To summarize, we are paying our yearly budgeted expenses. Our programming has not diminished, but the total number of us continues to shrink. In the coming years, we have a lot of repairs and replacements to do, plus a mortgage coming due, and we don't have the money to pay for it. If this was your own financial situation, what would you do?
Reverse mortgage.
There's one answer. Okay, we know this was a lot of information to take in. If you have some written questions, this would be a good time to pass them forward, and we will answer some of them now. As I said, we promise all your questions will be posted on the OSF page in the members section of the website with the best answers we are currently able to provide. And if you have no questions, I will assume that it was very clear, and I appreciate that. So these lovely ladies up here, two of which are monitoring the chat for the online. If there's questions from the online folks, type it into the chat. You have an equal opportunity to have your questions answered. I told Reverend Kristen that she could ask the questions because she has a much softer, nicer voice than I do.
So the first question, what is our annual budget for staff? Do we know that?
That's a good question because our staff and our programming are kind of one and the same, the staff, our ministers. Robbie, do you want to? Robbie will look that up. Let's get to the next question.
What expense reduction measures have we considered?
Well, you have to pay for the electricity. You have to pay a lot of things that we cannot cut. The question was, what cost reduction measures have we considered? I would say nothing that is significant enough to make a difference in what I'm showing.
Do you have an analysis of that?
So we need to use the microphone. So we're asking people only to please use your cards. And then I will do my best to ask them. Some of these are statements, so I'm trying to sort through which are statements. There's a question of inconsistency. It says that Dave mentioned pledges of about 300. Robbie mentioned 785. I think that's a difference between amounts and
number of pledges that we get, and the other is the amount they represent. So I won't go back to the slide, but in 2000 we had about 700 pledges. You could infer that half of those people were couples, so maybe we had close to 1,000 people financially supporting the church. That's now 330, 340 pledges, so let's say that's 400, 500 people financially supporting the church. The amount of money that we get for those pledges has not changed dramatically because those who are still contributing are giving more than, on average, than the ones who were contributing in 2000. Does that make sense? Great. Robbie is so good. So, who remembers what our budget is for the current year? 1.8, that is the winner. About 850,000 of that is staff, so a little less than half.
Has the church been ending fiscal years more commonly with a surplus or a deficit?
That's a very good question. So we have something that's called the general fund, and really what that is, it's our savings account. That savings account by board policy cannot go below $50,000. We always want to have that minimum amount. Over the many years, that fund has fluctuated between $50,000 and probably $300,000. Is that correct? $350,000. I think right now it's in the $150,000 to $200,000 range. Is it? No, it's lower? Oh, it's a little over 300. So in some years, we've had money left over. Why is that? Usually it's because our expenses have come in less than expected. Sometimes it's because we've gotten very generous one-time gifts that bring our revenue above what's budgeted. We don't budget for unexpected gifts. We budget for what we think is going to come in. So in a good year, we put money into the savings account, the general fund, and in a year where things don't go so well, we have to take it out. I will say that in the last 5 or 6 budget years, we have budgeted for taking money out. But we haven't always done it. But to balance the budget, which every annual meeting you see, it was a long time ago, but it was within my time here that we passed a rule that we would have balanced budgets. So to balance budgets, sometimes we say, well, we're going to have to take money out of our savings account, but then we don't spend it all, or we get surplus revenue. Anyway, so we have $250,000, $300,000 of extra money right now. What does that do? It could pay for 1/4 of the next 5 years of deferred maintenance. It's just not enough.
Do we have any idea what it would cost to move the memorial walls?
I'm going to talk about the future in the next half, so let's save that question. We have looked at, I don't want to get too far ahead of myself, we have looked at what could we take if we want to go, and I'll talk about that.
There's a question about the facilities maintenance, the depreciation. Do we believe it's optimistic or conservative? The assessment.
Do we think the assessment, $1 million in the next 5 years, $5 million in the next 20 years, is optimistic or conservative, Andy French?
It's not optimistic. There are some very real things. There are things that are not known. You usually don't know what your cost is. You have to find a check to your contractor. The people at home are not very good.
So, Andy, are you saying it could be worse, or this is more of the worst case?
Closer to the worst case.
This is closer to the worst case. So Andy has done a good job of adding in inflation, making assumptions, so we think it's more of a worst case than not. But I don't think anybody would say it's only going to be half of what's in there.
So some of these are specific questions about the building assessment, and I don't know if we want to do that or we want to refer people to the documents.
I would say let's specific questions on what needs to be done. We will answer those on the website because right now they might be answered by just looking at the one-page summary that's there.
If $1.25 million fell from the sky, would it make a substantial difference or just delay the problem a year or two?
What a good question. If $1.25 million fell into our hands, whether it came from the sky or wherever, what kind of difference would that make? It might buy us some time, but I don't think it will change the likelihood of what we need to do. And I see some people holding up additional questions.
A question, there are numerous weekly and monthly repair expenses that crop up and need to be dealt with. Is there a specific expense line that reflects that? Like, do we budget for maintenance?
Yes, we do. We do budget for the every day or every month or every year kinds of things that crop up. We just have not budgeted for the big things.
So I don't know if this is something you can answer, but what kind of marketing efforts do we need to do to attract people to our congregation?
Oh, I love that question. More? I know we are doing more. I had the pleasure of meeting with Valeria, who's our membership coordinator of the past 6 months. I don't believe that's what she does. We have another person who does our social media, who puts things out there. So I can't answer the question specifically of what we are doing, but I know we are doing things. Does anybody want to add to that, Reverend Justine?
Or I can answer if you want. So yes, we've been doing a lot. If you have noticed, our attendance numbers have been up quite a bit. We've been looking at least 50 people more in person and online since the election. And we've been implementing a lot of measures to make sure that we're welcoming people in well, helping them find connection to community, making ease into the membership process. So there's been a lot of focus on that area. We are bringing a lot of folks in. The question really is, can we all as a whole community really be part of that welcome, part of helping people connect into small groups, right? I think it's not just up to staff, it's up to all of us to create that culture of welcome. Also, yes, there's the work of the Outreach and Growth Fund, right? We see a lot of folks coming in through our Front Street Productions, so that's an amazing thing, and we have support there. As Dave mentioned, we do have now an outreach coordinator that focuses on social media outreach. So we've had a very increased level of social media engagement, and we're going to continue to focus on this.
So we're going to hold questions from the floor till later. Are we ready to move on?
I've got a few that are new that just rolled
All right,
in.
go ahead. We'll take a couple more.
What is the current mortgage balance? How do we pay it and
I
when?
will get into that in the second half.
Okay. How much do we get from the cooperative school? Are they still running?
86,000 per year? With 4% yearly increases.
Our intern minister left after 1.5 years. Is that a savings for us?
It's funded elsewhere, so the answer is no.
Well, it's 5,000.
All right, we put 5,000 in, so it's a small, per year, it's a small number.
Is there a way to generate more income by property use fees?
That's an excellent question, too. We have a couple challenges. If you look around this beautiful meeting house, what do you see? You see a beautiful place that is limited into what people can do with it. If you're putting on a play or having a performance or having a choir, this is great. If you want to have a meeting where people can sit and talk to each other, so this room, this building, which is, we're all here, is used a few hours a week, and the rest of the time it sits empty. Now, even if we filled it up, where would the people park? We're generating a huge amount of money from people parking at the rate of $5 or $6 or $5 an hour. I don't think people who are going to rent out the space are going to want to also pay $5 an hour to park. So we have that challenge. If we had people who could find a place to park and we had space like this that was more usable, we could do more.
A few more. Is tithing part of UU history and culture? What percentage of income do First Church members pledge?
I don't know on average what they do, but we do ask them from time to time what percentage of their income they pledge. And our norm is, or our, I don't know if norm, is we've asked people to try to get to 5%. We are not it's not our culture to ask people to tithe.
Have we considered another capital campaign?
Yes, we have. And in fact, about 7 or 8 years ago, we did extensive talking with all of you about whether it was the time, and the congregation said no, it was not the time. Is it the time now? Well, if we want to stay here and keep these buildings operating, that would be one way to do it.
So this is going to be the last question. When is the absolute time where if we do nothing, we'll need to take action or close the campus?
I'll get into that, and if that question is not answered in the second half of the presentation, we'll ask it again. All right, that was great. Okay. Many of us are visual people. Photos and sketches help us see both the present and visualize the future. A lot of you have seen this picture before. I first showed it about 6 years ago when we first began thinking about our future home. It's a Google Maps photo showing the UCSD campus, as it pretty much still exists today, at least in terms of the hospital. That's that yellow H. That's us in the lower left, our 9-acre campus, more than half of which is canyons that, as far as we know, have to be left as is. Take a closer look at the little gray P just below the hospital. That's our $650,000 income source, the parking lot, conveniently situated just across the street from the hospital. Here you see an aerial sketch of the same area as expected to be sometime in the future. What do you first notice? The hospital is very far away from where it is now. UCSD is putting in a ton of underground parking. That might even be a low number. Now, a lot of people would rather park outside and walk a bit, I for one. But they have their limits, and look where the new visitor parking is, the red P next to the arrow. It's rather certain that few will walk from our lot to the new hospital. Will anyone want to park here? Hard to say, but right now we assume not very likely. There goes as much as 1/3 of our operating revenue. By the way, as you see in the question mark up there at the top, UCSD is at least 2 years behind schedule. It was supposed to be 2030. So for the next 7 or 8 years, the parking lot can continue to generate a lot of revenue for us. Maybe that will help. Let's look at one more sketch as we visualize our future. Many people say they never knew a church was hiding back here. Well, that certainly is not looking to get any better. Right across the street from us, lots of tall buildings with underground parking that will house UCSD staff. Because that parking also includes guest spaces, we should not expect much parking revenue from these new buildings. However, seems like housing is one possible good use for our land. On that subject, a recent appraisal that we did said just that. Our property, if it was turned into high-density housing, could be worth as much as $66 million. Pretty good investment over the $380,000. $66 million for the land. That includes the parking lot. You can read the entire appraisal by going to the OSF page on the members area of the website. It is there. Now, one appraisal, one snapshot in time. So let's look at our options for where our home is in the coming years. Scenario 1, stay here and deal with the declining membership, loss of 1/3 of our revenue, millions of dollars for repairs, and a mortgage that will come due. Scenario 2, sell our valuable property and find a suitable new home, or vice versa, find a suitable home and then sell. Whoop, didn't hit that. Third, find a way to sell or lease all or some portion of our property and remain here. Perhaps partner with someone. And as Reverend Justine reminds us, it is critical that whatever we choose, we do so in a way that we remain in covenant with each other, our mission, and our values. Now, as you might imagine, it's been a challenge to predict the future well enough in enough detail to enable us to make the best choice. None of us probably knew what our individual homes would look like before we saw the for sale or for rent sign out front. But I hope today we are beginning to move closer to our best choice. Let's examine each of these scenarios. Scenario 1 is to choose to stay here and not sell any part of our Hillcrest campus to anyone. This is the easiest option to envision because we're already here, and it's also easy to find financially. Looking ahead, as I said before, we are facing financial challenges that frankly our entire OSF team sees no way to overcome. I don't have to read the first 2 bullet points to you. I think I've shown you the supporting facts. On top of those 2, we have a large mortgage that comes due in 7 years. While we have paid it down significantly, we are budgeted to only pay interest in the coming years. Our OSF team concludes that to maintain our current mission and survive here in San Diego, we will probably have to sell part or all of our Hillcrest campus within the next 2 to 4 years, or finding a way to partner with someone who can help us find a way to stay. I know that's difficult for some of us, many of us, to accept, and acceptance takes time. But we believe it's the reality we are faced with unless someone comes up with a lot of money to guarantee significant ongoing additional income. Parts of this scenario, finding another suitable location and move there, are easy to understand. We sell the entire campus to someone for enough money to do 2 primary things: generate enough revenue to purchase or lease and develop as needed another campus facility, and have enough money left over to securely generate at least, if not more, revenue than the parking lot currently generates. How much is that latter amount? Simple math says that $22 million will yield a return of $1 million per year at 4.5% interest. We could probably do better. Let's not get hung up on exact amounts. It gives you an idea. It's difficult at present to determine how much we'd actually need to maintain programming and put enough money away to cover future costs, including keeping our new home in good shape. Then the amount available for our new home depends on how much we sell this property for, minus the cost of moving and paying off the mortgage. I base this chart on the recent appraised value of our land. As you learned in December, our church board authorized our leadership to make a non-binding offer, also called a letter of interest or LOI, on a property coming available in Mission Valley. Why did we do that? The only way we could even go see the property was to do the LOI. I know it doesn't work that way in residential housing, but it does in commercial real estate. Well, our broker did a really good job, and the seller chose us as their preferred buyer. The price was $13 million, which was well within our means, but we would have had to make a binding offer earlier this month. Then we would have had 4 months to decide if that's the way we wanted to go. Our OSF team and the board ultimately decided we would simply not be ready to make that choice in that short amount of time, so we withdrew. Our broker does tell us that compared to 5 or 6 years ago when we first started looking for another campus, there are many more options now than then. How long that will last, difficult to say. Moving from your home of 60-plus years is a challenge under any circumstance, more so when you have a lot of large, cherished items that you would like to take with you. First, you have to find a new home that's available and suitable to your needs. What will it take to make it into the home you desire? If it's not ready, how long can you stay where you are until it's ready? Will the new home be easy to get to? Will people, in our case, current and new members, want to come there? Of our many cherished items, which can we take with us? And we've looked at all of these. Some of us may not wish to go even if that's our only realistic option. Will our new home result in future growth so that we can continue to carry out our mission and make an impact in the lives of so many as we have done here in San Diego for over 150 years? It's a lot to think about. And what if indeed this turns out to be our only realistic path forward? Well, we're not at that point now, but we think the congregation should understand this might, and I say might, ultimately be our best option. Remember, in the 1950s, the congregation, after much deliberation, decided to move here. I'm sure that was not an easy decision, but looking back, we know they made the right choice. And I'm confident we will honor them by making that choice that's best for our next 75 years. Finally, the third scenario. This one has the most unknowns, which makes it the most difficult to describe. One reason is we have to decide what our new campus would look like, including the very real possibility of sharing it with others. Sharing with others. What would that look like? And we are likely to get less money from a sell and stay option because high-density housing gives the most yield, but probably no parking for us. It could go in a number of different ways. We could sell just the parking lot to someone who develops it as they wish and provides us parking. UCSD is one party that has interest in this scenario. We could sell more than the parking lot and raise even more money and likely shrink our footprint. In any case, we still have to make sure we have the parking on Sunday. Now, just this past week, our OSF team has been meeting with advisors to other churches who have faced similar challenges, as well as a property developer and builder. It's way too soon to comment on those, and I won't. These discussions are very, very preliminary. It'll take time and effort to sort out what would work for us. But your OSF team is engaging with those who can help. If we did choose this option, we might find ourselves meeting and worshiping somewhere else for 2 to 3 years while everything was redeveloped. Will all of us stay until we are done and back here again? Okay, we know this is a lot of information to absorb. That's one reason we are not ready to make any decisions. Nevertheless, the OSF team would like to know what our members and friends, you, feel about these scenarios at present, whether some are clearly preferred over others, and which ones you could see yourselves willing to accept. As I said at the beginning, our goal is to converge on a scenario that is preferred by most and acceptable to everyone. You can also help us learn what information you do not have that would be helpful to you in answering these questions. So we are going to send out a survey to everyone sometime in February, after people have had a time to digest all of this and give it careful thought. Again, it is not a vote. Surveys are not votes. We plan to publish the results of the survey by the end of February or early March. Please help us out by studying the information we have provided and respond to the survey, which will be very easy to do and won't take much time. Today or tomorrow, we will also put this presentation on the OSF section of the members' website. Remember, there's 2 parts to our website, the public part that everybody can see, and then there's the members part where you need a username and login, and we can help you get that.
So it's recently come to our attention that trying to sign into the members section, sometimes you get an error notice. If this happens, try to sign into the board section. And thanks to Marcia Biller, I put a toggle switch. Thank you, Marcia. And that's the only way that I myself can get into the members section is signing into the board section. There's a green button that says go back to members page, and I click that and I can get into the members page. And then there's a link there to the OSF part that Dave has been talking about. So very clearly, if you get an error message trying to log into the members section, try logging into the board section, and then toggle back with the button that says go to members page, okay? Otherwise, you can send myself or Leora an email and we will try to help you. Thanks so much.
Okay. So this is what we see happening in the next few months. We will answer your questions as best we can. We will hold small group forums, in person and online, including one in South Bay. We will limit them to 10 people or fewer. You can sign up through the website, the public part of the website under the OSF section, go to About, and I'm sure you will receive an email giving details on how to sign up. We will publish the results of the survey so you can get a sense of what others are thinking. And the OSF team will continue to seek out those who can help us understand ways we might be able to stay and generate significant revenue. As we learn more, we will share it with you, and when we feel it's time to gather together again, we will. We are all in this together, and I think that's a good thing. Thank you. I understand we're aiming to be done by 2 p.m. or no later. Is that correct? Yes. So that gives us almost an hour for more questions and discussion. So we'll start with questions, and as I stated earlier, we promise they'll all be answered to the best of our ability.
And just to be clear, so I have a number of cards here that are not questions, they're statements. I'm going to leave statements for when we have discussion time. So folks are feel free when the discussion opens to make your own statement. So if you think, oh, Kristen hasn't asked my question, the reason is if there isn't a question in there, I'm going to hold that for the discussion time.
I really want to stress that we do want to make sure that we are done by 2. We need to respect the time of our staff and our contractors here who are doing our ASL. Those are the letters. So please, let's try to keep it tight and keep it on point. Thank you.
Great. So if we were to stay without outside help, do we know how much we would need to pay off the mortgage, pay for the current budget, and cover the maintenance needs? Do we have a sense of what that number is?
In the next 7 or 8 years, we'd need $8 to $10 million, 7 to 10, something like that.
Have we considered reducing the $850,000 that goes towards staff costs?
Sure. What program would you like to eliminate?
Have we talked about a plan for better signage for this campus?
Not recently. We did, some time ago when we did a capital fund drive, we did increase the signage. We didn't do everything that we wanted to do.
What neighborhoods and towns are we looking at properties for a potential move? How far are we open to considering?
I'm mostly going to speak for myself on this one. When I was working at another company that wanted to move, we considered where we were to be the center of gravity of where everybody came. And we concluded if we moved that center of gravity too far, we would lose people. And I think that applies to us. If we move too far in any one direction from where we are, we'll probably lose people. Mission Valley was one place that we looked because there's property available there. It's hard to find property that's available, developable, and that would work for us. So I don't think we would go too far. Mission Valley seems like a possible option, but we haven't told our broker who's working with us, only look there.
Thank you. Have we done an analysis of what size campus we need? Like what kind of square footage, a building, what size parking lot would we need as we're thinking about buying?
We've done some preliminary analysis of that. We know what the square footage of all our buildings are, and we know that they don't all have to be spread out. They could be stacked. There's no reason you can't put rooms on top of a meeting house. So it's more the square footage that we need to meet in, worship in, celebrate, have offices, preschool. It's also where you put it. So it's possible to shrink down some and put things up.
How much does it cost to run South Bay? The rent, the staff? How would this help us if we did eliminate the South Bay campus?
How would it help? My guess is we would save some money, and my guess is we would lose a lot of people. If for no other reason than the food pantry that we operate down there serves a lot of people. It serves our mission. There are many people here who don't worship in South Bay who contribute to that. I think, well, I don't make those decisions. That's a board and leadership discussion. I'm sure that question's been asked. I don't know if I'll answer it as well as they would, but it's part of our mission. We would have to change our mission. And it's not going to save enough money to fix these problems.
Is it okay if I make a comment about South Bay? So we've been in a similar process around sustainability and assessing, because we also noticed and were aware with rising rent costs that we could not stay as we were. And so South Bay is going through a major transition. We're in the final arrangements of signing an agreement with St. John's Episcopal Church, where both the worshiping community and the pantry will be moving. This will cut in half the cost for rent and utilities and other things. So part of that, right, even if, say, at some point we determine that we're not able to sustain 2 worshiping communities, we have made a commitment to a food pantry that feeds 500 to 600 families a week. That's 2,000 to 2,500 people who depend on the ministry and mission of this church to sustain their families. This is a vital ministry. I don't see that disappearing. This new arrangement to move into St. John's not only decreases our overhead costs, but invites in another partner to help make that more sustainable for the long term for us to live into that mission. So I hope that helps us understand some of what's happening at South Bay. I have a very practical question. I am a pledging friend, but I'm not a member. Can I access the members area of the webpage? No. So if someone was wanting some of these detailed documents, could they contact you, Robbie?
Or me.
Or Dave? Okay, so
we'll
contact Robbie or Dave.
We will, if you are that interested and that committed, you're certainly committed if you're a pledging friend, we will find a way to get you the information so that you can see it.
And join us. It's only one extra step.
How collaborative is the hospital during negotiating a possible sale or lease?
How?
Collaborative.
They have been very collaborative, but they have changed their priorities over time. So about 7 or 8 years ago, they were interested in purchasing the whole campus. Now their interest has been reduced to just the parking lot. However, we are on very good terms with them, first name basis. I mean, not all of them, but the person that we deal with, who's pretty high up. So we stay in contact with them. I mean, if we redeveloped and stayed here, and who knows what we could do with the parking lot when it starts to no longer generate income.
This one says, land value seems hypothetical. Have we considered putting the property up for sale to see what we could get so we would have a realistic assessment?
Well, that's kind of why we did the appraisal. You know, how many people would put their house up for sale just to see what it's worth? So probably not going to do that, because the word would get out really quickly that we're just not serious, and people wouldn't spend any time giving us a serious offer. So that's why we did the appraisal.
There's a question here, is the underground parking for UCSD Hospital actually realistic? I've heard it's not possible.
I've not heard anything that supports that, and I would be surprised if that's the case, but as you know, it takes a lot of permits to get things done, and I guess we just don't know well enough, but I've not heard anything that suggests that they can't build their underground parking.
So another question about the UCSD plans. It says the 2032 vision rendering of the map. The current parking lot that we see right here is meant to be torn down and made into a park, a dog park. Is that the understanding of the OSF committee? And does it challenge our ability to stay here because of parking?
Good question. Just like the hospital, my understanding of that parking lot is it does not meet earthquake standards, so it has to be taken down. I don't know when, but when it does, we lose one source of overflow parking. But I think we will know well in advance of when that happens so that we can decide if we need to make any plans accordingly. We do know that the parking lot between Front and First that UCSD has is going away soon. That's probably actually a good thing for us because it might drive more parking to us.
There's a question here, more of a statement, but I'm going to phrase it as a question. Can you talk about what's available from the Outreach and Growth Fund if we were to try to pay off our mortgage?
We have 500, so we have 500,000 for a matching grant, and that's the only thing we can use it for.
Okay, so Robbie says that we have a matching grant from that fund of $500,000. So if somebody raised their hand and says, I want to reduce the mortgage by $1 million and gave us $500,000, it would be down to 0.3 instead of 1.3.
A follow-up question on that. So say we were to pay down the mortgage, how much might that save us on our either monthly or annual? Like how much goes towards paying that?
Robbie's looking up what the interest we're paying per year.
No, it's 5.5, but I'm just thinking of so 555.
So currently we pay $55,000 a
Paying down $1 million would save us 55.
Okay. Paying down the $1 million would save us $55,000 per year? Okay. Thank you. All right. As we're thinking about new potential locations, are we taking geology into account? For example, Mission Valley is a floodplain, and the hillsides are prone to mudslides.
I would say wherever we go, we would take those things into account. We don't want to have a flood the first year we're going there. So, the people who figured out moving here, they were smart people. They took a lot of time, but it was not an easy sell. If you look at the big liberal religion book that we have that has the history of this campus, I think what I read was they had a meeting where it was still very undecided, and somebody pulled a piece of wood out of some support beam and showed how it was crumbling, and that's what swayed the vote. True story.
So there's someone asking here if we considered staying and building, keeping the meeting house, the welcome center, but tearing down the office, RE, preschool, and the parking lot, and building something on that land.
The short answer is yes. All options are on the table. Tear down some of the buildings because it's better to do that, to tearing down all of the buildings, including this one. You can't build on top of this building, but we could build on another building that was here. We're looking at it.
If we go into a future capital campaign, are we able to receive funds from outside sources that are aligned with our principles?
I think we're open to anything that's reasonable and that fits within our values. I'm going back because there's something I forgot to say, but go ahead, keep reading the questions.
Has there been any discussion to think about like partnering with other congregations to create a shared complex? The example they give is UCC.
Nothing substantial has been done in that area, but if somebody came to us and said, let's partner, and it was another roommate that we thought we could get along with, we would consider it.
Is it possible to move the whole fountain?
The whole fountain, I don't know. I think anything's, but a long time ago, we had an IT person here, and I would ask him for data, and he said, anything's possible with enough money, and so I guess it's just a question. This past week, Ken Herman was here, coincidentally, and I hadn't talked to him for a while, and I said, Ken, what would it take to move the organ? And he took me back and gave me the nickel tour. There's actually 2 stories. There's 4 or 5 different sections of pipes. It's not just all one. And he said, oh yeah, we could move that. I said, how much? And he said, I'll just say something under 100,000. And maybe half that, I don't know. I would think this organ is so important that if we just had a small capital fund drive to raise money to move the organ, we would get it in a week. So we've looked at the memorial wall, we've looked at the sculptures, we're paying attention to what we would want to take. And not just if we moved, if we relocate, if we stay here, but move things around. So we don't want to see those cherished items gone. Should I say something about the tree? Nah.
How does the decline in membership at our church compare to other denominations?
It's everywhere, not just liberal religions, it's everywhere, but there are pockets of places and churches that are doing really well. And I think it's important that we take a look at who they are and what they're doing. Is it because they have a different message, or they have a different way of reaching people, or I don't know. I mean, Reverend Kristen said later about outreach. How we attract new people is important. What we do once they get here is also important. This past week, I decided to join the membership team because I think it's important. I think we all have a role in welcoming people and meeting them and giving them a reason to come back. The very first Sunday, I sat up there in the top row, and somebody came and sat next to me and talked to me, and I heard a good sermon, and I decided right there and then I was coming back. Had no one talked to me, I don't know, might have not made a difference, and it might have. Yes.
You can repeat what I said. Many of our congregations in the West that used to be more than 500 people are less than 500 people now in membership. Like Neighborhood Church in Pasadena, and so maybe you could just say that you're not alone in that.
Right. So Sarah's saying that in the West, many of the UU churches that were over 500 people are now under 500.
Yes, and also we have not declined as much as many mainline denominations have.
And we've not declined as much as many mainline congregations have.
I will also just say thank you, Dave, for joining the membership team. We are actively looking for other people who are committed to this church to help us on that membership team. So if you are really wanting to think about how people get welcomed in, how we can increase our membership, that's the place to go. Contact Valeria. She can help you get integrated into that team.
Or come up and see me afterwards. I'll take your name and we'll contact you. One Sunday a month, just one Sunday a month, either greeter or usher. I've made a proposal to the team to give tours again at the end of the service, docent tours that we used to do, and the team said they'll consider it. So might need some more tour guides.
Great. Have we considered the fire risk from our canyons right here?
Yes.
The question was, have we considered the fire risk of the canyons that surround this campus?
Our insurance person was just here this Wednesday, so we are paying attention.
Do we have any other questions online? Okay, so before I ask the last question, I'll just say someone just wrote a big thank you to Dave and the committee. So will you join me in a big thank you? The last question here is, when will we have enough information to vote?
September 20, what? I don't know. If somebody came in tomorrow and met with us and said, here's what I would do, here's how much money you would get, and here's what it would look like, and we showed it to, and we thought it was reasonable, and we took it all to you and said, hey, we think this is reasonable, what do you think? And you all said yes, well, we'd be done, right? But it takes a while. All right, I said I wouldn't talk about the meetings. It takes a while for somebody to come in here, look around, see what we need, and make us an offer. The hardest part is us deciding what we want to look like physically. What would we, if we left this building as is, what would we do out there? If we took this building down, what would we put in its place? What would we put on top of it? All those things generate different amounts of money, but they also generate different scenarios. Who would we want living above us? Right? So when will we know enough to vote? Well, it's kind of like I asked forever if I was ever going to meet the person who was the love of my life, and I said, I'll know when I know. And there she is. So I don't know when that is, but I think it'll be within 2 to 4 years. I'm hoping it's within a year that we get to the place where we can start solidifying on one answer. But if we spend the next year and a half, and every option that we see for staying here doesn't work out financially or doesn't work out culturally or whatever the criteria are, then we're probably going to come back and say, we've tried this, we tried this, we tried this, we tried this. None of them work. I don't know that that's going to be the case. Like Valerie said, I'm open. Personally, I'd like to stay here, but I'm open to any outcome that works for this church. And I think most people in their hearts feel that way, even though in their hearts they would prefer that we find a way to stay. Do you want to read the comments and then we'll open it up? Or are those, could you have those, right?
I think that we should, my feeling was that some of the comments were long, that if people have comments that weren't read by me, if you're going to open the floor, I would allow that.
Now it's time?
So,
Okay, great.
yeah.
Do we have more microphones?
I know I can go around with this one. I think there's another one here.
So, as I showed on the last slide, out of respect to everybody else, please be concise so that everyone has a time to speak. We've got 40 minutes left. That's plenty of time for discussion.
This one, yep.
Hi, I'm Kathleen Brand. I'm a landscape architect and planner, and I've worked for the city of San Diego for 7 years. So I've worked in the permitting agency, and I've worked also for the previous redevelopment agency. So I know a little bit about development and redevelopment of sites, and I am, of course, familiar with our municipal code for the city of San Diego. And the city is doing everything possible right now to actually make it easy for churches to redevelop their sites, because they know that they have a lot of land, that they are poor, but they are land rich. And that's a way for the churches to make money, and it's a way for the city to gain more housing stock for the community. But I think what we have jumped too far ahead is not creating what I would call the program. We've never sat down, like you said, Dave, and said, okay, how much square footage do we need for an office? How much square footage do we need for meeting rooms? How much square footage do we need for a meeting house? You know, what is our needs? What are our wants? And then you take that program and you overlay it on the different sites. Can we meet our needs at these other properties? Can we meet maybe even one or two of our wants? Can we do it here? And I think that's something we touched on it when we did Dream Church. Remember when we did that survey a couple years ago? But we never quite went forward more detailed. And I think it would help us as we're making these decisions, what sites are actually helping us meet those needs and those wants. Thank you.
I think it's very important that we figure out what we want, what we need and what we want. And whether the team does it, the OSF team does it, or we ask for somebody to help lead that discernment process, it needs to be done. Yeah, you want to do it?
Sure, I'll do it.
All right. Please come up after and we'll talk.
Wow, you have a lot of power, Dave. Is this on? I'm Marge Worgel. I love this faith. I love this beautiful community. I love this campus, first of all. I'm deeply appreciative of all the work that Reverend Justine has been doing with us during this period of time. Thank you. We have needed that. We are healing. We are coming back. We are filling more of the seats here in the meeting house. I believe that what may be most helpful for us right now is to put on hold for a little while longer the decision about our campus structure. We are friends with one of the chief architects at UCSD, and she just told us that they are even more behind than they thought. They don't even know right now how many rooms they want in the hospital. She is saying they have a good 8 to 10 years at least. We have many years yet where we will have parking lot income. My desire would be that we start the ministerial search process now, or in the timeline that Reverend Millspaugh shared with us, and we bring on a settled minister, and then we work with that minister to go through this whole process of discerning, staying, going, selling, sharing. So I would just love to see us put this decision on hold for a little while. There's a lot to do with the search process. But if we wait and do the search process and this discernment at the same time, I think that's quite a bit. Thank you.
Dave, I think you mentioned this earlier. I'm Everardo Aguilar, by the way. Dave, I think you mentioned this earlier, but I think, I'm not sure if I heard this correctly, that have we or has anybody from our congregation talked to University Christian Church or St. Paul's about how their redevelopment went? Because St. Paul's over there on 6th Avenue has sold part of their property, and there's now a gigantic apartment building next to them, which they do have access to because they have beautiful meeting spaces there. And University Christian Church is currently under construction from the part of property that they sold. And as a result of that sale, they were able to redo what was left on the other side of their church. So they now have a much better improved area for their Sunday school programs. So I'm just wondering if we've talked to those congregations or any other congregation who's had an experience of having a shared development like those two have. So
I've spoken to the project manager at St. Paul's, and What he told me is it took them a year to figure out what they wanted, including what they could do by what's zoning you're allowed to do and density and all that stuff that I don't firsthand understand. But they took a year, and then they hired a developer, and that took them part of the way, and then they hired another developer, and that took them part of the way, and they finally ended up with a third developer. It was a long process. So that's why, as much as I appreciate what you're saying, Marge, we aren't going to stop learning what's possible, and we're not going to bring any decisions to you for a vote until we think we have the one that is favored by most, acceptable to all. That's the goal. Now, we might come up with 2 of those, and that'll make it more challenging. Let's say we found out a stay here, and this is what we get, or go there, and this is what we get, and they both look attractive. Well, it's better to have 2 good choices than none. Right now, we have none. So I don't know where it's going to go. We're just going to follow the path. But things that have been said here today that we can do to help us figure out what we want, regardless of where it is, that's really important.
Hi, I'm Bella Firth. I've been a member here for about 20 years now. And I'm looking around the room, and I'm seeing a lot of other folks who have been here a long time. And I'm also seeing that I'm hearing that there are more newer folks here, newer voices coming in. Is there a process by which we can really actively reach out to some of those younger folks? Because when we first joined, we were in that little tiny blue sliver of pledging friends. We were in our 40s. We are older than that now. And we're now part of the large sliver of older folks who are now making up, 50% of the voting, the pledging friends of this church. How can we get some of the newer folks who are not yet as firmly entrenched as Everett and I became over the last wonderful 20 years, how can we get those voices more firmly into this conversation? Because it's really not our future we're talking about, it's theirs.
Hi, friends. Tony Bianca. I'm director of Lifespan Faith Formation, so I admittedly have a different hat on at the moment. I just wanted to notice that as we have these conversations, and we had the last one, I just hear a lot of conversations about the things that we love about this campus, the meeting house and the memorial wall and the fountain. And I sit there with my lifespan, younger people hat on, and these are not the spaces that attract those people. And I would just like us to sit, maybe not now, but sit as we have these conversations with the idea that the things that we in this room who are ready to vote on, the things that we value might be exacerbating what I see as the underlying problem of that pie chart getting older and smaller, right? And so I would hate for us to make a decision to stay based on valuing things that are just going to continue to exacerbate the problem. And that's going to be hard for those of us who love sitting in this chair looking at that tree in a room that is very not functional for multi-generational worship.
Hi, I'm Elsie Sleater. I'm Elsie Sleater. I've been here since about 1988. I was a Unitarian Universalist in Northern California. This room is not all it's cracked up to be. It has terrible acoustics. We have done shows in here. You can hear somebody talking up by the glass doors more on the stage than you can if you're sitting in the front row or a little back. The acoustics are terrible. The choir loft is lovely, but it's not very functional. I'm happy to let this room go. I'm also happy to let the church go. I mean, we need to do what, I think we should go for the money. I know that sounds awful, but I really do. I think we should go for the most economical and the one that maybe we should just tear everything down and put up high-density housing here. Use that income to go where we want. I like the idea of Mission Valley. It's closer. I'm in Imperial Beach, so I'll probably be at South Bay. That's all I have to say.
So my name is Martha, and one thing that I was thinking about as we were talking about all of this is that I would love to be able to see visual representations. I remember the last meeting, I was moved when I think Robbie spoke about the Mission Valley property, and even though you couldn't really describe it very much for us, I could tell from your reaction and your face and your demeanor that it was a beautiful space. And so, you know, and this is, I think, one of your challenges is that we're all sitting in this room, in a room that we may have attachments to or may not. But it would be nice to visualize, you know, and these alternatives, whether through a sketch or visiting places. I don't know how realistic that is, but
I think it's very realistic and very appropriate that before we go too far down any path, we're going to want to see what it looks like, because pictures tell 1,000 words. So we're committed to having sketches once we know what we want somebody to sketch.
Okay, but I have a question. Okay, my question is, how attractive are we to a new minister with this terrible financial problem hanging over us?
Yeah, that is a concern. So, and especially because it was one of your developmental goals. So if we don't resolve it, it doesn't mean that the steps will be in place, but if we haven't made a decision, then that would, you know, it's a drawback, I would say. Over to Caroline.
Caroline Clark, and I've been here since I'm Caroline Clark. I've been here since 1971. And I think this place is malfunctioning from the time I first came in. As she said, you can hear more clearly from the back and the front, and it doesn't work. And we've been at the sound system forever. Beyond that, we can't move the seats. They don't go anywhere. We can't use this hall for anything else. And for example, St. Paul's on 6th Avenue, just somewhat recently, has removed all of its pews. The floor is gorgeous, and it can be used for a rummage sale, it can be used for a basketball court, it can be used for church. And that's what we need here, or in our church when we have one, or maybe we don't have a building. We'll figure that one out. Thank you.
I would just like to jump in here if I could, because I want to go back to the very important points that Kathleen Brand made too. A lot of these questions, and if you think about discernment as this period of openness and curiosity, a lot of these questions can be considered at the same time. So whether we stay, go, or share, we should absolutely be looking at what do we actually need? And we've done that like on the back of an envelope, kind of, like what do we think we need? You know, in terms of ballpark, which at this point I think is appropriate. I mean, what's the general, how many offices do we need and so forth. But I think this is a great time for us to take up, what do we actually need for space? Because we haven't used this space as efficiently as we might. And I don't know if this happened in your lives, but during the pandemic, a lot of stuff just kind of got thrown around into spaces, and there's a lot of clutter, but one person's clutter is another person's treasure. So we have some discernment around what things do we need, what spaces do we need, and I and the OSF team would welcome more people to be involved in asking those questions. What do we actually need? And then we know what we can sell or share. So
absolutely, that's very important, and it sounds like Dave and Kathleen are ready to take that on, which is wonderful, and if you could get some more people to join you, that would be great. So thank you for letting me say that. Who's next? I guess Keith.
Dear beloved community, I know that Tom Owenthal said that's the real work of the church, is building beloved community. And I've been coming here since 1957, when I was 10 years old. Actually, it wasn't here, of course, because this hadn't been built yet. We were meeting at the Lafayette Hotel, which I thought was great because I got to go swimming when I came to church on Sundays. But I don't think I'd want to wish that kind of situation while we're calling a new minister. I was just thinking about what would it be like if we decided to go and then we started our search for a new minister in the middle of the chaos of moving, which probably is a process which will take years. So I think it's 8 to 10 years at least before we have to deal with the hospital turning off the parking spigot. So we have plenty of time to deal with this go or stay issue. But now is the time for us to get our settled minister and figure out what is our mission and what is our strategy? How are we going to grow? If we grow, we have a different financial situation. And if we don't grow, well, we die. I was recently told about a Unitarian church which is thriving and growing, and it's Fort Collins, Colorado, which is a relatively small community compared to San Diego. They have 500 members right now. They have 2 services on Sunday. I think the first one is online and one of others in person. And they have 200 members of the 500. Well, they have 200 people showing up at each of their services. And they have a program for growth and a program for, it's not just getting people to come, as in marketing, but they have a whole process for how they bring people into and involve them, and then train those who, well, first of all, people have gifts to share. And so the people are offering yoga classes, meditation classes, Zumba. They just have a whole lot of members providing real services. And then for those members who want to be leaders, they have training programs. And for those who are developing into wise elders, they have a way of involving all of the congregation in the business of the church, in the executing of the mission of the church. And I think that we should put this go-stay process on hold until we have our settled minister, which we should do now. I think we should do that search process now. I don't want to see us stretch out this being in limbo for another year. And together with our new minister, we can figure this out. But like Dave was saying, our growth is a very important part of how this plays out, and that we should be focusing on that.
We have probably time for a few more, right? We want to wrap up.
Excuse me. Yeah, John Roshinsky. First of all, I want to say I'm not advocating for this at all, but I think a really important question that we have to ask ourselves is, we're in the situation here, is it going to be any different if we go somewhere else? So in other words, if we're in decline and there's a big expectation that we can offset that with growth, if that growth never happens, is it going to make any difference, regardless of where we end up at? And so my question is I think there's a fourth option, which is we basically sell the property and we distribute all that money to the other UU congregations here in the region, including South Bay, and we just disband this location altogether, or this particular congregation altogether.
All right, everyone breathe. Everyone breathe. It's, nothing is off the table, as Dave said, so thank you.
Hello, I'm Rose Van Oss. I've been a member here since 1983. Though originally a pledging friend for 17 years before I became an actual member. I love this campus. I've listened to people bring up some very good points. The point about it will take a really long time to actually get settled in a new location, if that is what we decide, is a good one. And it would be difficult to bring in a minister with everything uncertain. I am suggesting that we consider calling the minister, but do not put this process on hold. There are way too many things we need to figure out that will take time, that will take meetings, will take surveys for us to arrive at the discernment to come to the decision that is acceptable to all and best for most of us. So I think we should go about the process of calling the minister and continue actively exploring all the questions the Go or Stay have raised. Thank you.
I'm Carolyn Woodbury. I'm on the OSF committee. I've been here since before Keith. I went to my first UU meeting downtown on 6th Avenue in the basement. And people welcomed me. And I went to the Lafayette Hotel and I came here. And I joined this church in 1960. And until today, during this meeting, I had not even considered losing this physical building. And listening to what has been said about it and the multi-use idea kind of woke me up. And I feel that it is so important for all of you to sign up to go to one of these forums and talk in small groups and see what kind of ideas you come up with. Our committee is going to go and not be there to talk. We're going to have 2 people at each forum, one to help encourage you to talk, and the other to take notes. And we're not going to write down who says what. We're going to write down people's ideas, people's concerns, and then we're going to get back together and put them together and see, well, what do we got? And I think we're headed for a survey. We're headed for let's have another big meeting like this in a month or a month and a half after we've digested the results of the forums. And I asked Sarah Millspaugh on her way out if Justine was willing, Could we have her stay another year to help us through some of this process? She's doing a fabulous job of helping us be organized. And I asked Justine if she was willing to stay, and she said yes. So that we don't have to rush into getting a new minister. And I agree with what was just said about having this process. We're not knocking any buildings down or moving anytime soon. And in the meantime, we're still way behind financially to just pay our current bills, get rid of our mortgage, and do the maintenance that we need so we don't have torn carpets on the edges of this meeting house. In the meantime, we need to do some at least minor repairs, some minor painting to make things look a little more cheerful, clean the chairs in the meeting house. These are things that just aren't in our budget. And they're not going to be there unless we start figuring out how to generate some extra money. So anyways, please, please come to the forums and give us any ideas that you have. And if you've got a talent, like the wonderful lady that I forget her name already, that I had lunch with and has agreed to help us with this process. If you have a talent, like one of the people who is an attorney, a real estate attorney, that showed up after the last big meeting, that might be useful in this process, tell Justine or Dave or me or any of us about what your talent is. Help. Don't just sit back and say, oh, somebody else will do it.
Thank you.
I think that's about all the time we've got. We've only got 13 minutes left.
And we have more time, to come.
Yeah,
in
yeah.
Small groups and large groups, yeah.
Yeah, there'll be more time. I'm sorry we couldn't get to everybody. I was thinking as we're sitting there, in 1970, when I was 5 months old, I was baby Jesus on this very stage. In those days, as my mother would call it, she called it the generic mother and child. So I've got some history here, just like we all do. And I hope that we are able to consider everything that we've heard today and keep our minds open to all of our options. Let's think of it as yes and there's always room for improvement. Let's head for improvement, lean into discomfort. I talk about, I'm pretty okay with being uncomfortable. The last half mile of a 100-mile endurance ride, that is the most uncomfortable you will ever be in your life. And you got to get through it. So let's get through this together.
So I've been asked to offer us a closing blessing. So join me in the spirit of prayer. Spirit of life and love, thank you for this opportunity to be together, to hear one another, to learn together. We are so deeply grateful for the work of this committee and for this opportunity to lean into our mission, lean into who we are and who we are becoming. We ask, Spirit of life and love, that you continue to guide us in this time of discernment and help us to lean into this work of beloved community. Blessing be.
Our closing song comes from us from the African American tradition in the time of slavery, and it uses the metaphor of feet and running. And I hope that will be okay as we understand it as a metaphor. There are many ways to travel, but this song uses the metaphor of guiding our feet. Guide my feet while I run this race. Guide my feet while I run this race. Guide my feet while I run this race. For I don't want to run this race in vain. Hold my hand. Stand by me while I run this race. Stand by me while I run this race. Hold my hand by me while I run this race. For I don't want to run this race in vain, race in vain. Guide my feet, guide my feet while I run this race. Guide my feet while I run this race. Guide my feet while I run this race. For I don't want to run this race in vain, race in vain. Blessings. Let us go forth in peace. Amen.
And we are officially adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you, Dave Hunt.